everybody. Welcome back to the Business of Laravel podcast, where I talk with business leaders in and within the Laravel ecosystem, and their projects are working with Laravel or they're working, with Laravel folks. And today I have my relatively new friend, but I feel like it's one of those people where you meet somebody, you just kind of click, and we sat across from each other at the Laravel Live UK speaker dinner and just talked for hours. So this is Matthew Davis, the CTO at Mumsnet. And before I go into any further detail, because I'm supposed to make you talk, Matthew, can you kind of give the folks an introduction to who are you and what is the company that you're working with? What is y'all's business and kind of what is its relationship to Laravel?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Matthew Davis, as you said, CTO at mumsnet.com. I've been a developer for sort of 25 years, and I've been at Mumsnet for the last 4 years. So I started there as technical lead. And the sort of brief with that was to completely rebuild Mumsnet from the ground up.
Really?
As a PHP application.
What was it prior?
So it used to be a hybrid mix of like Ruby and Java.
Okay.
It was quite an old code base. It was like a 20-year-old code base.
Yeah.
And yeah, there'd been some sort of attempts in the past to rebuild, which is why it ended up as this Ruby Java mix.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I got hired, and the decision was made that it was going to be written in PHP. And were
you the lead of the rebuild, or were you one of the leads of the rebuild?
Yeah, so I was the lead developer of the rebuild. So
no pressure, right?
No pressure at all.
And for those, I want to go more in that, but for those who don't know, outside of the UK, it's probably not super familiar. Can you tell us a little bit about Mumsnet?
Yeah, so Mumsnet is like an online parenting platform. So it's the UK's biggest parenting platform where people can go to ask questions if they've got difficulties with any parenting issues. That's what most people think it is, but it's so much more than that. So there are topics for everything. There's an area on the site for like chicken keepers, for example.
Really?
And topics around sort of everything like TV, film, podcasts.
And is it mainly forums, or is there a lot of other kind of mediums that it's working in?
So it's mainly just the forum on the site. We have around about 8 million monthly active users.
Wow.
So it's pretty big. And we get around about 30,000 posts a day.
Okay.
So that's the equivalent of something like 40 novels being written on Mumsnet every day.
So I can't tell you how many times I've talked to folks in that same circumstance who've wanted to do a ground up rewrite, and the number of those who actually ended up doing it and succeeding is extremely low. So while this is not necessarily a technical podcast, I do think there's a lot of CTOs and people, C-suite folks who are really interested in this conversation of what does a ground up rewrite look like. So I think one of the things I'm really interested is, could you kind of walk us through, as much as you're able to share, kind of walk us through the story of making the decision and then also implementing such a huge shift without basically the company grinding to a halt during that time?
Yeah, it was pretty tricky, to be honest. With it being such an old platform, there was no documentation about what it actually did, and it had evolved sort of, organically over that 20 years.
Yeah.
So the first thing we did was we've got a product team, and they took stock of basically what everything did on the site. So we knew what we were aiming for. And as we were sort of going through that process, there was things that we said, okay, yeah, we'll definitely build them so that they're the same as they are now. But there were other things like the whole sort of authentication system where it's like, actually, we need to redesign this and do it differently. Just with it being a modern site, it was difficult to do some of those things the way that they were being done before. So that was kind of the first step. And then there's also a content side of Mumsnet as well. So we've got an in-house content team who write articles around everything to do with parenting, but also to do with travel and holidays. So the first thing we actually did was rebuild the CMS side of the project. And once we'd done that, we span up a Laravel application that was basically taking all of that content. It was WordPress CMS at the time.
Okay.
It isn't anymore. But at the time, it was a WordPress CMS, and we set up this system where we could send that content to Laravel and serve it from a Laravel application.
Very cool.
So that was the first thing we did. And then we just bit off each feature as we could until a point. It took us around about 18 months And after that 18 months, we decided we were ready for a launch. It's a really busy site, as we said, so we had to schedule that in really, really carefully. We ended up doing it at sort of 3 a.m. in the morning. And we attempted that 3 times.
Oh my God. I bet you there's some stories there.
Yeah, it was tricky. So one of the things that we really needed to take stock of was because the old database structure, nobody had any idea like how it worked.
Wow.
So we'd got this legacy database that had like 900 tables. Nobody knew what most of those did.
Goodness.
So the way we approached that is we built the Laravel app as we would build it if we were starting from scratch with the correct models. And then we wrote some migration scripts to do that.
I figured, yeah.
When we originally did that, those migration scripts took about 3 weeks to run. And it was like,
oh my goodness,
like, we certainly can't have this. So a big sort of pain point was we've got to get this down to like some reasonable amount of time because we need to cut the site off, do the migration, launch the new site. And so, eventually we got that down to sort of, it took around about 2 to 3 hours to run the migration.
Still, that's crazy.
But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. So you said you tried it 3 times. So would you all run it and something wouldn't work and you'd say, oh, well, we'll set it for another week from now? Or would you just like, we're going to try it? Okay, got it. All right.
Exactly that. Yeah. So the first time we did it, we launched it and it was just really slow.
Really?
With that amount of data in it, it was just super slow. So I was like, okay, we'll roll back and, we'll figure that out.
Okay. So that at that point was just sort of like this Laravel app as it's built with this many records is slow. So we're now going to put the live site back on Java and Ruby. We're going to put this many records on our Laravel site and we're going to do another couple of weeks of work until it is fast with that much data in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Got it.
So yeah, I mean, as it always is, it was database queries that were making that super slow. Yeah. So I reached out to Aaron Francis.
Cool.
And we spent a day sort of going through that. And he's got an article about some like deferred join thing for pagination that sort of came out of that session.
Very cool. That's awesome.
So yeah, the second time we did it, we ran the database migration and the migrations just kept failing. And I had no idea why. I'd run them hundreds of times. They were working fine.
But that day.
And it turned out I hadn't stopped a cron job from running that was affecting the data. So I had to ring the CEO at 3 a.m. to say, I'm really sorry. This is not happening tonight.
Yep.
Which is not the most fun phone call I've ever made.
I believe it.
I mean, she was great about it. It's like, okay, what have we learned? Let's try again. So then, the third time, we stayed up all night. We got it done a couple of weeks later.
Fantastic. Do you regret doing it this way? Or if someone has 18 months to lose to write something from the ground up, you'd say, no, this is the way to do it?
I think it made a lot of things now a lot easier than trying to do some sort of incremental rebuild. Yeah. Because I think, you've got to draw a line in the sand and say, actually, this is the new platform moving forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard when there's business pressure. To continually sort of innovate and make new features and
were they building new features on the existing app while you are doing the rebuild, or did kind of just everything in pause for a year and a half?
They were having difficulty getting new features out anyway.
Okay, right. So it's 20 years old and nobody does know. Okay, so you're kind of like, we're not getting new features anyway. Let's put our energy towards this rewrite, and then we can get new features. Yeah,
absolutely. And it was super hard to get features out. So like that whole deployment process took around an hour. So if there was a problem then it took an hour to roll back.
Oh my gosh.
So there were, we had to figure that out to move forward. It's great now. We use like all the standard Laravel stuff. We use Laravel Forge to manage the servers.
Okay.
We've got Envoyer, which we're using for deployments. So I mean, a deployment now takes sort of a minute and a half, something like that. Okay.
So many people think in order to have something at that scale, I've got to be on Kubernetes on, 16 different, load balance servers. And I haven't actually gone deep on this with you, but just the fact that you're saying standard Laravel, Envoy or Forge or whatever, and you have the scale you do gives me kind of a hope that there's a story to be told here. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, like what is, and again, I don't want to go into like the deepest technical architectures, but again, so many CTOs are being told the only way to hit scale is to do it like Vercel does, do it like whoever else does, which is crazy edge servers, functions, AWS, thousands of dollars a month, 5-person ops team. And I'm just like, how, when you do it on Laravel, using the Laravel standards, Forge and Envoyer, what does your actual technical architecture for hosting look like? What does your DevOps look like?
Yeah, so we're all on AWS. It's got a ALB load balancer in front of 6 EC2 servers, and that's pretty much it. We've got we use RDS for the database, and it's a pretty heavy sort of RDS server just because it's been read and written to so often.
Yeah.
So it's quite beefy, and we've got like a read host and a write host and those kind of things. But yeah, it's not really much more complicated than that. We've got a couple of EC2 boxes that run like Redis for caching. But it's not any more complicated than that.
I love to hear that. And it's not to say that there's something against Kubernetes, but so many people who they don't have a team set up for something that complex feel like it's the only way to scale. And what you just described, I appreciate you kind of hitting that right level of technical complexity as you described it. What you just described is really accessible, like any Laravel programmer who knows how to run Forge and Envoyer knows how to run Forge and Envoyer in front of 6 load balance boxes. They might have to learn load balancing, which might take them a week or something like that. But then that's it. Like this does not require, unless you tell me I'm wrong, but it doesn't sound like it's something that requires a dedicated ops team of 6 people or anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we manage all that DevOps stuff within our team. So we've got 7 developers,
nice.
And we manage all the DevOps, all server management, everything.
I love that.
In-house.
That is so cool and so encouraging. So how long ago was it that you did that switch to Laravel?
It's nearly 3 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what kind of technical stuff is on your plate now? Like, what are you enjoying working on, and what is challenging to you now? Because you're like, well, breath of fresh air. We can push out features, but there's got to be other stuff. Kind of what's tripping you up right now? What's exciting you right now? Yeah,
there's a lot of things coming up, but not too much that I can talk about publicly.
Totally fair. What about in the past? In the last couple of years, is there anything that has kind of that was fun, and now that it's kind of out, you can talk about it?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that was missing in like the legacy Mumsnet code base and in the application was any kind of personalization. You couldn't. It never knew what you were interested in, so it could never serve up things that you might like.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've done over the past sort of 12 months is we've built like a Facebook style feed that learns about what kind of things you read, what kind of things you interact with, what kind of things you're interested in. And we've built this feed that sort of learns as time develops and serves you up things it thinks you might be interested in.
Yeah.
And then I think another thing that a lot of forums have really, where you're reliant on your users to post content in the right area of the site. So we've got like a thing that's called ABU, which stands for Am I Being Unreasonable? And people are posting there for, am I being unreasonable about this? And people can vote on it and all that kind of stuff. But people quite often post in there about things that really should be in a different topic. And one of the things we've done is we've built this whole system of like NLP categorization of things, which means we can actually collect posts about specific topics from wherever they're posted and serve them up together.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we've just built this new sort of feature that's called Discover, which is live on the site now, and we've curated like these subjects. So you could say, right, I want to see posts that are about 3-year-olds because you've got a 3-year-old, and it will collect posts about 3-year-olds from everywhere on the site, no matter where it's been posted, and give those to you.
And that's not AI. You said NLP, so we're talking natural language processing, which means it's like machine learning. And a lot of people maybe don't understand kind of the delineation between the two. They're like, oh, the computer knows something, it's ML. Or these days, the computer knows something, it's AI. So for natural language processing, you're basically running, and I'm going to say, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, you're running a script and it kind of structures known metadata about that thing that you can then act on, right?
Kind of. So there's a Google API which you can give it some text and it will give you a bunch of tags and how confident it is about what those things are. About how confident it is that piece of text is about those tags. And it's got a list of maybe 300 things, and they're actually quite granular. So we ship off things to there and we get that data back.
Yep.
But we've also got an in-house data team who've built like an ML system. Because it's not as granular as saying, okay, this is about 2-year-olds or this is about 3-year-olds. Right. Yeah. So we do handle that in-house. So we've got some Python stuff. I think actually, no, that system's written in R.
Yep.
So what happens there is when somebody posts, we put a queue job in SQS. We've got a Lambda that's running this data service. It will do that categorization and then put another job back into another queue. And then we read that back in the Laravel app to sort of save those tags.
Yeah. And that's really cool because, not to be anti-AI, but there's a bunch of pros of what comes out of AI right now, but there's also a lot of restrictions. It feels very inaccessible. No, not a lot of people are at the point where they're going to build their own, large language models or anything like that. And then also there's all these conversations about the ethics of AI and the electrical costs of AI. And so we are getting to the point where AI was a hype, but now AI is, really showing some of its, its shortcomings. And it's also very expensive to rely on AI as we think about it, GPTs and stuff like that. So the idea that you're building something that feels like machine intelligence, but the way you just talked about it, I'm like, okay, so, ML can be a little bit overwhelming, but sending a chunk of data out to an API and getting back a whole bunch of tags, and each tag says, we think it's 90% likely attached to this tag, 80% likely attached to this tag, or whatever. And then just using that data alone to build some kind of intelligence of how they're structured feels like magic, right? It feels like intelligence. Yeah. It feels like artificial intelligence in a way where that's what we're excited about from GPTs, but you can build this stuff in your app today without touching an LLM, without touching OpenAI or anything like that. So that's really fun that y'all are it doesn't have a big AI label on it or a picture of a robot, but you're using computers to give us better answers than just what is coming from the people, right?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's about serving up content that people need, or when they need it, and that doesn't need to be that complicated.
Yeah,
we're doing nothing special with the tags. It's literally a many-to-many relationship in our Laravel app, and we just say, okay, give me all the posts that have got these tags at this confidence level.
That's very cool. Yeah, I mean, If one of the things that we want is for the machines, to make the lives of humans easier versus, we're always, there was that trope on Twitter that unfortunately I repeat every time, which is I don't want the machines to take my creativity. I want them to take away my, my rote and mundane tasks. Effectively tagging posts when I put them up is a mundane task that people are also not necessarily particularly good at. And so being well, great. Robots could do that for you. It's just that's what I want this stuff to be used for in the first place, right?
Yeah, definitely. I want it to do my my chores. I don't want it to do the stuff that I actually am excited to do. Doing.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I want to talk really quickly about managing and hiring Laravel developers. So for starters, are the majority of your team members full stack Laravel devs, or do you have a front end and a back end team? Or
so we've got 2 developers who their primary focus is front end, and everybody else is a full stack Laravel dev. Okay.
And how have you found the experience of hiring Laravel developers?
It's a mixed bag, I think.
Yeah.
It's you get some really, really great Laravel developers, but you also get some not great ones who are applying as well. Yeah. I think one of the things that I always look for is a real sort of culture fit. I feel as long as you've got a base level of programming knowledge, you can do stuff, and you can learn stuff. It's more about having that right attitude and, being curious about things and always wanting to learn something new for me.
Love that.
I think having that sort of curiosity and being able to recall something that you may have read 5 years ago and go, actually, that solves this problem right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, We always say like I can teach somebody how to do some new advanced coding thing, but I can't teach somebody how to be a good person or how to be curious or how to be a self-starter or how to, like be a lifelong learner, And so if you can say, like you said, they don't need the baseline because they need to be productive on day one in the tech stack. But like if you can hire for good people that meet that baseline, and those good people, and not just good people like as human beings, but also good in terms of curious and whatever those kind of metrics are, where if you think about like the most capable, most productive, most brilliant programmer you've ever worked with, who you actually enjoyed being around, usually they have some of those same characteristics. They've got they're always looking at something new, or in their spare time they're going out to this other technology stack, and because they're curious and they're learning about it, you start identifying what those characteristics are, and then kind of wanting to hire for them, regardless of whether they actually know the fullness of every single thing, or whether or not they can do linked lists on a whiteboard. You know what I mean? Like it's like, yeah, that's cool, but like
it's cool, but nobody does that in the real world.
Exactly. It has no relevance to our actual jobs. Okay. Yeah. So when we were at Laravel Live UK, you gave a talk about conflict and relationship and everything like that, which was brilliant. And everyone should, if you get a chance to bring Matthew in to speak at a conference or anything like that, you should bring him in to give this talk. But it really kind of made me think about what your life is like as a technical leader of a team. So your role is CTO. You've got you got 7 developers underneath you. How much of your job is coding and technical stuff, and how much of your job is like people things?
I think I don't do much actual coding anymore.
Yeah. Familiar.
I do a lot outside of work, but that's again because I'm curious and I want to learn stuff.
Familiar. Yep.
But I also think that part of my job is to keep on top of those new things that are happening, keep on top of what's happening in Laravel, keep on top of what's happening in the ecosystem. Because if one of those people comes to me and says, I'm struggling with this, I feel like I need to be able to give an answer, or at least know where to go to find the answer.
Yeah.
So the majority of my time is spent, sort of working with our product team to make sure that, we're building what they envisage. Mm-hmm. I think my sort of management style is quite hands off. I feel like we're all adults, so I try and treat the team like adults. Hopefully they would agree with that. Because we're all there to do a job, and if we're all aligned around the same goal, then we will do our best work, I think.
Okay, well, that's where we're going right now, because that just gave me goosebumps, because I just see so many people where they're not getting what they want, and so the answer is to kind of clamp down. What does it look like to build that trust where you actually believe that it's going to get done? Does that happen at the hiring level? Does that happen at the some level of oversight beneath you level? Like, how do you build a team where you can trust to be hands off? You can say, here's the assignments, and I know that you're going to do good work, and I'm not going to micromanage you.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to hiring for that culture fit. Mm-hmm. If you've got people who fit in with the culture, the team quite often will sort of give each other the support that they need. Yeah. So, if somebody on the team is struggling with something, they will quite often just, ping somebody and say, oh, can we jump on a call? Can we get this done? Like, can you help me? Yeah. And that's why I think that culture thing is so important, that you can trust them to do that, and it's going to get done. And there's going to be bugs sometimes. We've got processes in place. We do like code reviews and all the standard stuff, but things slip through. But we try and treat that as a learning opportunity. Like, if there's a problem, okay, we get it fixed, and then it's like, okay, what did we learn from it? How can we prevent that same problem again?
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it was fantastic. And it kind of leads me to another question, which is, you were just talking about, a lot of your job right now is working together with product. Another thing that I see commonly is a line in the sand between product and engineering, where there's a huge lack of trust because product asks for things and engineering is always making excuses. And I'm saying that's not saying that's the case, but that's how it feels, right? We want things from you, and you're always making excuses. And then from engineering's perspective, it's product is always kind of forcing us to do these things. They don't understand technical debt, and there's just kind of like this communication, whatever. do you have any tips for how to build a healthy, understanding, trusting, respectful relationship between engineering and product?
I think it's always difficult between those two teams. But I think that, there are things that, we put in place to try and mitigate that as much as we can. I think having everybody aligned around the company goals is one thing.
Yeah.
But our project process, when our product team have got an idea of something they want to do, we try and involve the developers quite early, so that if that there is some technical reason why we can't do something that the product team want to do, we'll get on a call and we'll hash that out until we get to something that does the same kind of thing, or something that meets their goals. So it may not be the same thing at the end of the meeting, but something that meets that goal. And I think we try and give the whole team ownership of a feature, rather than it being, this is a product feature and you've got to implement it.
That's really cool. Is there any, let's say you were talking to somebody at a company where there's just a huge distinction. Product finishes the thing, they throw it over a wall, and there's hardly even any interactions between product and engineering. Is there one change to their meeting schedule, or one make sure they see it at this point, or just one little change that you think that company could make to get moving in the direction of where you all have it?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that made the biggest difference for us is getting those developers into that product meeting before it's been scoped out, before it's been designed, before it's finalized, because then nobody's precious about it.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's not a finished thing. So it doesn't feel like it's unchangeable at that point. That's
brilliant. I love that. I'm very excited about that conversation, because I think that trust in teams, within and between teams, is something that is just really difficult. And I'm seeing a lot of people struggling with building that. And the more I talk to people, the more, autonomy and respect of each other's opinions are really important. Autonomy and ownership, people feeling like they are an active part of the thing, is often more important than that they do what they want to do, or that they get paid a certain amount or whatever. It's do I actually make an impact on the thing? Is it different because I was there? Was my opinion actually heard and respected? Seems to be one of the most important things for folks. So that's really cool to hear.
Great.
Okay. So, as we think about the decision that your business made to choose Laravel, were you a part of that decision, or did they choose Laravel and then hire you to implement?
Yeah, they'd already made the decision that they were going to use Laravel.
Okay.
Or certainly they'd made the decision that it was going to be PHP.
PHP, yeah.
And it's so long ago, I can't remember exactly whether totally they suggested Laravel or I suggested Laravel. But it made sense at the time to use something that, gave you so much out of the box for free, because of the scale of the thing we were trying to accomplish. They tried other stuff. They tried some microservice stuff, and it was difficult. And I don't think the team really was set up to handle that kind of abstraction of all those different parts and all those moving parts of an app. So I made the decision that we weren't going to be doing microservices. We were going to have a Laravel app that we could deploy, and everything changed at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think it was sort of a bit of both.
Yeah. So when you think about the productivity of your team and your ability to, push out ideas that product has, are there any kind of easy to name ways in which choosing Laravel versus choosing, any of the other kind of tech stacks has really made it clearly providing business value for you all, where you're able to say, we can respond differently to products requests, or we can give uptime or whatever? What are the first things that come to mind when you say, these are the business benefits that we get from choosing Laravel, if that makes sense?
That's a difficult question.
I know. Should have prepped you on that one.
I think one of the benefits that Laravel gives you is that it has so much stuff out of the box that actually you can just get right in your business code more quickly. So before I used Laravel, I was a Symfony developer.
Okay.
I did the Symphony certification. I spoke at Symphony Live.
Yeah.
So, I was really heavily invested into that. And then when I started using Laravel, it was like, okay, this has got like queues out of the box, which is something that Symphony didn't have back then.
Yeah.
Or it got, a caching layer that was just there. Yeah. So it meant that you didn't have to worry about any of that as long as you did the things that it said in the docs, like this is how you use the caches. This is how you use the queues. Yeah. It made all of that really easy, which meant that you could deliver software that took advantage of those without needing to do all the work to set those up.
Yeah, it allows you to spend more time, like you said, writing the business's specific, software versus spending a lot of time writing generic things that are going to be in every application, which the more time you pay for that, the less time you're paying for software that actually is unique code that is unique to the features that you want for your company.
Yeah, definitely.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so if I want to talk a little bit about what it took for you to get to where you are in your career today. Obviously, you're not just coding. You're also kind of leading, thinking about people and processes. Again, you gave a talk about kind of relationships and conflict and stuff, and you're thoughtful about what it looks like to have respect with your team, good relationships with your team and product. How'd you get here? Are there any kind of books or articles that you really like, or are there any experiences you had at previous companies, or like what kind of, if somebody wants to come up and be where you are today, like where should they go?
I think I've been really lucky in my career that I've experienced a lot of different businesses and a lot of different managers. And I've always tried to avoid the things that I didn't like when I was a developer.
Turns out that takes you really far.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've been writing code since I was, 4, basically. Like I had a wow. ZX Spectrum when I was 4, and the only way you could get that thing to do anything was to write some code.
Yeah,
and it's just something that I've always been interested in. And my sort of progression, like I've done agency work. But I think the majority of my time has been spent at companies building an app, but then also maintaining it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really important thing to experience. Because you get to experience your own mistakes.
Yeah.
Further down the line.
Yeah.
And I think it's a natural progression quite often for developers to end up moving into management and moving away from the code that they actually enjoy doing.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, like, I try and keep that, like, outside of work. Like, I will spend a lot of time coding. I'm learning Swift. I'm learning Swift UI at the moment. I'm trying to build a Mac app and nice. and all that kind of stuff. I mean, as far as like books and things like that, like, there's a great book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott, which is all about giving feedback.
Love that book. So good.
That's a great book. The one that the talk was based on at Laravel Live is called Conflicted by a guy called Ian Leslie. And I'm currently reading one called Growth Levers by a guy called Matt Lerner, which is about how to find like areas of your business that you can grow, the things that you should be focusing on. But I think it's that really. It's reading a lot of things that's not just about programming, reading these kind of books, reading business books, trying to get that sort of overall knowledge of how a business works. Because whoever you're writing software for, it's a business at the end of the day, and there's going to be business objectives, and that business is going to make money to pay you. So understanding that process is... And
I really appreciate the fact that, because one of the things you mentioned earlier was that, like, one of the ways to have these trusting relationships is making sure everybody's aligned together towards the same goals. So what you're talking here about, we got to make sure that we understand the goals, that we are all working towards them, and then we're all given kind of space to work towards them. Like, because people don't traditionally think of developers as having insight, input, or anything, education of how to think about the business objectives. And so you're saying, let's do a combination of like, hey, we want developers who are capable of aligning themselves there. And then we want to give them agency and ownership to actually be a part of that. And when you're kind of doing that whole thing, everybody's better off. The developers are better off because their voices are heard and everything like that. They're happier, but then also product is in a much better space because they're developing things for the development to build that is actually buildable versus throwing something over the edge and again discovering that was not something that is actually manageable for us to implement. So like everything's more productive, everything's more aligned. I'm like, this sounds great. I love this idea.
And like as a business owner, if a developer came to you and said, look, if we do it this way, it's going to cost X amount. But if we do it this other way, that gives you 90% of the same result, but it's going to save us, X amount. Which one are you going to pick?
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to save us money, and most often in those cases, it's going to make the developers happier. It's going to make our technical debt ongoing lower. It's going to make the maintenance cost of making changes to things in the same area of the application simpler later. Like there's so many business benefits that come from developers having an active role in this conversation. Yeah. And I just love how you're kind of
absolutely
presenting it so simply. Okay, so we talked kind of mainly about my topics, but I just wanted to kind of ask you, like you have a lot of opinions and you have a lot of ideas, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way at all. I mean, you have a lot of well thought out, well earned opinions. As you think about this podcast, I don't ask this people off the time. What do you think people need to hear from Matthew Davis's experiences? Are there things that you've done, or are there things you've learned, or do you want to give me a 90-second rundown of part of your talk? Or, is there something that you're like, like if I get a platform, I want to make sure people hear this that we haven't covered yet today?
I think one of the things that a lot of developers struggle with is the soft skills that you need. And being able to just talk to people about things, being able to disagree with people in a productive way, being able to give people feedback and not being scared to do that, because that's not a natural thing for anybody to do. We're always told, if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say anything.
Yeah.
But that's the only way people can grow. And for me, like I want people to give me feedback. I want them to tell me if I could improve something so that I can get better, because I want to be the best version of me that I can be.
Yeah.
And I think really, really sort of working on those soft skills is really, really important for developers to be more successful in a business setting. Certainly.
Now you mentioned radical candor being something in that direction. Do you have any other? And also, you mentioned conflicted. Are there any other practices, experiences, courses, books, or anything you're like, if you're a developer and you want to learn soft skills, here's where to go? Or maybe should they just get started with those books?
I think those ones are probably a great starting point.
Okay.
I think a lot of it is down to experience and knowing, reflecting on things that maybe have happened with people. Not too much that you drive yourself crazy.
You don't want to get,
but just having that sort of self introspection to say, actually maybe that was me and it wasn't them. And sort of acting on that moving forward is
that's good. Normally I don't do this, but I have a talk I gave a long time ago called, I think, Empathy is a Superpower, or Empathy Gives You Superpowers. And if y'all are interested as a developer, if you're interested in learning more about what Matthew just talked about, this idea of just imagining like, how did that interaction go and how did it make that person, and how can I be kind of bringing and understanding other people's experiences more? That was the primary focus of the talk, was trying to say, hey, developers, you're going to be a better developer, better employee, better spouse, better all these other things if you're a little bit more considerate, or able to be a little bit more considerate. So we'll put that in the show notes. I don't normally plug my own stuff, but I was just like, that just reminded me of it, so I had to throw it in there.
I'm going to go watch it.
So it's
if it's available.
Yeah. So it's almost time for us to start wrapping up. So I'm going to get to our last questions of the day. So the first thing is are you all hiring, or do you think you're going to be hiring anytime in the near future?
We're not hiring at the moment.
Okay. If we wanted to watch out for when you are hiring, where would someone go?
So we always post on LinkedIn. If you follow Mumsnet on LinkedIn, we always post there.
Okay.
We use Workable, so that goes out to tons of job platforms.
Yeah, all the different. Yeah. Okay. Do you personally have anything you want to plug?
I wish I had something to sell, but I don't.
Be kind.
I think the only thing that I would really sort of plug is Mumsnet itself. Like, it is a really, really useful resource. Whether you are parenting, whether you're pregnant, whether you're on that journey or you're not, there is so much there for everybody, and I think everybody can sort of benefit from other people's opinions.
Yeah. All right. And here's the last question. If you were offered £100 million today, you don't need to show up to work tomorrow. I don't know what happens, whether it's you had owned an ownership stock of Mumsnet or whatever, but whatever it is, it's going somewhere else and you are just replete with money. What do you do tomorrow?
I'd probably make sure my parents were comfortable first. That would be the absolute first thing I'd do. Put some money aside for the kids. And probably concentrate on building my wife's business.
Okay. I love that. Yeah. So if you were doing that, not to go too deep down that, what do you think your role would be? Are you a jack of all trades there, or would it be mainly technical?
I think I'd probably end up doing all the technical stuff, all the people management.
I love it. Fantastic. Well, that's brilliant. I kind of expected that everybody's answers would always be the same to that, and not a single person has given the same answer yet. I'm like,
really?
I love people. Everyone's going to be like, oh, you're going to be on the beach. No, that has not been it. Awesome. Well, Matthew, you are a wonderful human being. I have delighted in getting to know you, getting to learn from you, and I really appreciate you coming on here to share kind of your thoughts and your experiences with us. Thank you, dude.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.
Yeah, it really has. And to the rest of you, thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week.